All right, let's talk about it. Hiring your very first employee. This is one of those make or break moments, right? You get it right, and you're on the path to serious scale. But get it wrong, and it could literally sink your entire company. So today, we're going to break down exactly when and how to make that leap. We're going to turn what feels like a terrifying decision into a huge, calculated opportunity.
Okay, so how are we going to tackle this? We've got it laid out in 5 key steps. First, we're going to start with you, the founder, and that feeling of just being completely maxed out. Then, we'll dive into the hard numbers, what your bank account needs to look like. After that, we'll get your systems sorted, because you can't hire into chaos. Then we'll talk about your big shift into being a manager. And finally, the fun part, pinpointing exactly who that first person should be. By the time we're done here, you're going to have a super clear path forward.
So, first things first, we've got to start with the most important person in the business at this stage. And that's you. Because look, the very first sign that you need to hire, it's not going to show up on a spreadsheet. It's that gut feeling that you've personally hit a wall.
And really, it all boils down to this one simple but super powerful question. Are you working in your business or on it? If you're stuck down in the engine room just shoveling coal to keep the lights on, who's actually up on the bridge steering the ship? And that feeling, that wall, it has a name. It's called the capacity ceiling. And if you're a founder, you know exactly what this feels like. It's that crazy, frustrating point where you're working harder than ever. Pulling all-nighters, but the business just isn't growing. Why? Because you've become the bottleneck.
And you can see it in all these signs, right? The 14-hour days just to stay afloat. The admin work eating up all your big-picture thinking time. Growth has flatlined. You literally can't keep up with customer demand. All of this points to a massive shift in the math of your business. Suddenly, the hidden cost of not having help is way bigger than the cost of a new salary.
Okay, so that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, that's the smoke signal. But you can't, and you shouldn't, make a hire based on feelings alone. Now we have to get serious and look at the hard numbers. The financial signals that tell you, yes, the business is actually ready for this.
So what's the number one thing to look for? It's all about consistent, predictable revenue. Before you even think about writing a job description, your business needs to have this reliable engine humming. And what we found is that there's a kind of sweet spot you're aiming for, somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 in recurring revenue coming in every single month.
But revenue isn't enough. You also need a safety net. And listen, I'm not talking about your regular emergency fund. This is different. We're talking about a dedicated hiring runway. That means enough cash in the bank to cover that new person's full salary plus your own living expenses for a solid 9 to 12 months. This is so important because it's not just about money. It's about giving yourself the headspace to lead without panicking about payroll.
And here's exactly why that runway is non-negotiable. Check this out. Almost a third of startups that fail because they hired too early. You got to remember, a new person isn't going to be productive on day one. They're a cash burn for at least the first 3 to 6 months while they learn the ropes. You have to be able to ride that out. You absolutely have to.
All right, so let's say the finances check out. The money's there. Now we have to talk about your operations. Because you can't just drop a new person into total chaos and hope for the best. That's a recipe for disaster.
This is where a concept called process maturity comes into play. And all that really means is that you've figured out a clear, repeatable, and documented way to get a task done. Think of it this way. You are not hiring someone to figure out how to do the job. You're hiring them to run the playbook you've already written and proven works.
And this might be the most important distinction we talk about today. The wrong reason to hire is to get someone to solve a problem you don't understand yourself. The right reason is to hire someone to run a system you've already built and perfected. You're handing them a playbook, not a puzzle. Huge difference. Okay, this next part is a big one, and it's all about you. It's about a personal transformation. You have to evolve from being the company's best doer to becoming its first real leader.
Yeah, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's that moment your role shifts from doing the work to building the system. Your value to the company is no longer about how many tasks you can check off your to-do list. Your new job is to build the machine that checks the tasks off for you.
And you can literally see that shift right here on your calendar. As a solo founder, 100% of your time is spent doing. But with your first hire, Boom, that changes overnight. Suddenly, like 40% of your time, almost half your day, is spent managing, mentoring, and actually working on strategy. That is a massive mental adjustment.
And what's really interesting is that, some founders are just naturally better wired for this moment. Research actually shows that founders with a high tolerance for risk, who are open, and who can really trust other people, well, they tend to nail the timing of this first hire, hitting that perfect moment that unleashes a wave of growth.
All right, we've covered the when, the why, and the how. We're in the home stretch. So now let's get super practical and figure out the big question, who exactly should this first hire be?
So how do you decide? Well, the guiding principle here is it's actually brutally simple. You need to find the single biggest thing holding your business back, the #1 growth constraint. And your first hire's entire job is to just come in and smash that bottleneck.
And 9 times out of 10, that bottleneck is going to fall into one of these main categories. Like, are leads pouring in but you don't have time to actually talk to them and close the deal? You need sales. Are you losing customers because you can't give them the support they need? That's a customer success hire. Is your delivery backlog just getting out of control? That's operations. The point is, whatever it is, you hire for the role that will make the most immediate, measurable impact on your revenue.
In this timeline here, this is a really fantastic roadmap, especially for a bootstrapped founder. The key thing to notice here is the patience. Look, that first hire doesn't happen for a year, maybe even 18 months. That's after you've proven product market fit, and, just as importantly, you've saved up that cash runway we talked about.
So let's wrap up with this final thought, this final mindset shift. Your first hire, they aren't just an expense on a spreadsheet. They're your first real, tangible investment in scale. They're the key to breaking through your own personal capacity ceiling. So the only question left to ask yourself is, are you ready to lead?